You turn on the tap, and clear water rushes forth without hesitation. Safe, pure, available at any hour. In the quiet hours before dawn or after a long day, you reach for a glass or a bottle, trusting what flows so freely. For most of us today, water is background noise, an everyday convenience so seamless it barely registers. Yet this reliability is a hard-won triumph. For the overwhelming span of human existence, finding water you could drink without courting fever, dysentery, or death was a daily gamble that shaped where people lived, how they moved, and whether they survived. The story begins under open skies on the ancient African savanna, more than 2 million years ago. A small band of early hominins presses forward through tall grass swaying in the hot wind. Their leader halts on a low rise, eyes scanning the horizon where a faint ribbon of greener vegetation cuts across the dry expanse. They turn toward it because green in the dry season speaks of roots reaching deep. Animal trails, worn smooth by elephants and antelope, guide their steps where the ground dips and insects hover low. They pause. Sharpened sticks probe the soil. Damp sand yields a slow seep. They wait as silt settles, then drink sparingly, always watchful for larger predators claiming the same source. These early humans read the land like a living map. They followed herds to watering holes but approached only after the animals had their fill. Clusters of certain birds signaled hidden springs. In rocky terrain, they sought cracks where moisture gathered overnight. During the harshest dry spells, they scraped dew from leaves at first light or dug beside ancient riverbeds where underground flows lingered. A stagnant pool was avoided, fast-moving streams were preferred, one misstep, one contaminated drink, could weaken the entire group. This intimate knowledge passed through stories, observation, and bitter experience allowed small bands to range across continents. Water dictated every migration, every camp, every rhythm of life. Archaeological traces show repeated occupation beside reliable sources, silent evidence of generations who learned to move with the landscape rather than against it. Yet movement itself was a kind of solution. As long as groups stayed small and mobile, nature's delicate balance held. The true reckoning arrived when humans chose to stop wandering. Around 12,000 years ago, as the great ice sheets retreated and climate steadied, some communities in the Fertile Crescent and beyond began to experiment with planting wild grains and tethering animals. Fields required care, harvests demanded protection, villages of mud brick huts rose near rivers, but staying in one place created new dangers. Larger groups meant more waste. Rivers that once ran clean now carried the traces of human life. The very decision to settle made water riskier. Near what is now the Levant, a community gathers around a widening shaft sunk into the earth. Men and women work in shifts under the sun. Antler picks and wooden shovels bite into soil, baskets of earth rise on ropes. As the hole deepens to several meters, wooden frames brace the walls against collapse. At the bottom, a digger feels for the cool dampness that promises groundwater. When water trickles in, the base widens into a small reservoir. Clay lines the interior to reduce seepage. This well, one of many appearing in the archaeological record around 7500 BCE or earlier, marks a turning point. People were reaching deliberately into the earth for protected water. Households still drew from rivers, letting jars stand so sediment sank, or straining liquid through grass and sand. Deeper sources often proved safer, tasting cleaner, and causing fewer ailments. Rain cisterns lined with clay captured seasonal bounty. The shift to farming had begun to bind humans to the task of managing water. In the plains of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates, the challenge scaled dramatically. Seasonal floods could drown fields one moment and leave cracked earth the next. Sumerian communities responded with coordinated labor on a vast scale. Laborers dug broad canals that branched across the land like veins. Earthen dikes rose to contain the river's fury. During inundation, sluice gates opened, guiding muddy water into broad basins where it lingered, dropping rich silt before clearer flows continued to fields. Reservoirs held reserves for the dry months. In growing cities like Uruk, public wells served daily needs while private ones supplied households. Women balanced clay jars on their heads, children splashing at the edges. Maintenance crews cleared silt year after year. Cuneiform tablets record the careful allocation of water rights, showing how tightly life was linked to these channels. The system supported dense populations and the world's earliest cities, yet they required constant vigilance. Overuse brought salinization, neglect invited disaster. Still, the ingenuity turned hostile rivers into the foundation of civilization. Along the Nile, Egyptian farmers adapted to a more predictable rhythm. After the annual flood receded, networks of earthen banks transformed the floodplain into a checkerboard of basins. Water soaked the soil for weeks before draining, leaving fertile ground ready for planting. Later, the shaduf appeared, a long pole balanced on a pivot. Counterweighted with mud or stone, a farmer swings the bucket down into a canal, fills it, then levers it upward in a smooth arc, emptying precious water into higher channels. The motion repeats through the heat of the day, sustaining crops beyond the river's reach. Stone nilometers along the banks measured flood heights, helping officials anticipate abundance or scarcity. These techniques fed a civilization that endured for millennia, though standing water still bred mosquitoes and disease. Greek cities approached water with growing concern for public health. Athens constructed large cisterns to harvest rainwater and modest aqueducts to bring distant flows closer. Physicians advised boiling suspicious sources or allowing them to settle and filter. The Romans, however, pursued the challenge with imperial grandeur. From springs in the hills outside Rome, surveyors laid out routes with meticulous care. Crews excavated channels that mostly ran underground, protected and cool, lined with waterproof concrete. Where valleys interrupted the path, soaring arched bridges carried the flow across stone precisely cut, rising tier upon tier, water moved by gravity alone, descending at a gentle rate of mere centimeters per kilometer to avoid erosion while maintaining steady progress. The Aqua Marcia, finished in 144 BCE, stretched over 90 kilometers. By the height of the empire, 11 major aqueducts delivered vast quantities of water into the city. Public fountains bubbled continuously. Bath complexes echoed with voices and splashing. Overflow fed the great sewers, carrying waste away. Maintenance teams walked the lines regularly, scraping away mineral deposits that threatened to choke the channels. For the first time, a city of over 1 million people enjoyed relatively consistent access to better quality water. The achievement was not flawless. Distribution varied by neighborhood. And risks remained, but it represented a leap in scale and reliability. As the classical era faded, new refinements emerged farther east. In the arid landscapes of ancient Persia, engineers developed the qanat, a system that would spread across the Islamic world. Teams sank a deep mother well into a mountain aquifer, then drove a gently sloping tunnel outward for kilometers. Vertical shafts provided air and access for removing spoil. The gradient was calibrated with care so water flowed by gravity, cool, clear, and shielded from evaporation, emerging at the desert's edge to nourish villages and orchards. The technology minimized loss in harsh sun and reduced surface contamination. Legal codes governed shared maintenance and fair division, underscoring the qanat's central place in society. Some of these ancient channels still deliver water today, silent witnesses to sustainable ingenuity. Medieval Europe relied more heavily on local wells, springs, and rivers. Knowledge accumulated slowly through trial and painful error. Epidemics repeatedly reminded communities how fragile their hold on clean water remained. The decisive shift arrived in the 19th century. Investigators traced cholera outbreaks to specific contaminated sources. Large-scale sand filtration and chlorination plants transformed city supplies. Vast reservoirs, treatment facilities, and buried networks of pipes extended the ancient dream of reliable water to millions. Every modern system still rests on foundations laid by those first well diggers, canal builders, and tunnel engineers. The next time you lift a glass or let the tap run, the gesture carries echoes of distant pasts, of trackers following faint green lines across savanna grass, of hands steadying ropes as baskets of earth rose from deepening shafts, of water arcing gracefully from a shaduf under the Egyptian sun, of Roman arches spanning valleys and Persian tunnels whispering beneath desert sands. Each generation confronted the same elemental need and pushed the solution a little further. Clean water was never simply discovered. It was coaxed, engineered, protected, and shared across thousands of years of human striving. In that ordinary, life-sustaining sip, we touch the longest thread in our shared story, one that turned vulnerability into security and allowed civilization to take root. The quest continues, quieter now, but no less essential. We drink not just from a faucet, but from the accumulated wisdom of everyone who ever thirsted and refused to accept thirst as fate.